Well, welcome to MotorMouth, brought to you by the Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicles. I'm Kendra.
Is this where I'm saying I'm Dan?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Dan.
You're on cue. We are here in the gorgeous Reading Diner that is inside the Boyertown Museum, and we would love to have you visit us. Here at the museum, our address is 85 South Walnut Street in Boyertown, Pennsylvania, or you can give us a call, 610-367-2090, or feel free to visit our website, boyertownmuseum.org, and you can find all the staff's email addresses, whoever you need to talk to. And we'd love to hear from you about the show, especially. We like feedback.
We
do take topic suggestions. So please let us know your thoughts, and we'd love to hear from you. So, like I said, we're here in this beautiful diner, and being that we at the museum like food, I'm going to tell you about our next big event coming up here, which is on Saturday, June 30th. It is our 4th annual food truck fair. So I can't believe it's 4 already. So this is a great event for us. We hope we'll see you there. It's from noon to 4 on June 30th. And we're going to have about a dozen food trucks here out in the parking lot.
Ice cream? Is there going to be an ice cream truck there?
There will be ice cream. Mr. Softy will be here in his, I think it's a 1976 ice cream truck, which was bodied here at the Body Works.
I don't think anybody really looks at the truck. They just know there's ice cream here.
But for us nerds here on staff, we think that's cool.
Yeah.
So they'll be here. Sly Fox out over in Pottstown will be here as well, and a variety of other stuff. So you will be able to find food to your liking, we promise. And it's really nice. It's only $5. It gets you into the fair. It also gets you into the museum. And there's a lot of great stuff here to see. So we hope to see you on Saturday, June 30th. And while we're at it, you should mark on your calendar September 1st, because that is our next Duryea Day, 53rd annual Duryea Day at the park. Of course, MotorMouth, we typically travel over there to the park and talk to some of the car owners that day and get to hear the inside scoop on the cars and trucks and motorcycles that they bring to the park. So that's September 1st. That's really the big things I have to mention going on here at the museum. And I guess I'll turn it over to you, Dan, but I think we're going to pick up and go see another car, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to pick up and go see another car.
Yeah, we're going to go visit one of the cars in our collection. We don't have a guest car tonight, but we are going to look at something on one of ours.
Yep.
So we will see you in just a minute out in the gallery. Well, we are standing here by the 1921 Packard, which is a monster of a car.
Yeah.
I love it. It's great. So why are we standing by the Packard?
Okay, we are going to be talking about something to do with these things, the wheels, okay? And I have an advertisement, and Kendra, if you could show that advertisement. This is a friend of mine, actually, he emailed me this advertisement. This book was for sale on eBay, and he scanned it and sent me this, and I said, wow, look at that. And this is called the Jiffy Jack, and it's the jack tires up, but the neat thing is it's made in Reading. It's Bittler, Haynes, and Little Incorporated in Reading, okay? And if you get a flat tire, you put this on. And if you see this here, this is the object here, and I'm going to read right out of their advertisement how it works. It says, you place it against the inside of the wheel with the shaft between any two spokes. So the shaft right here, you put it like between the spokes, if you can get me there, okay? Rest the broad felt pad against the fellow. So there's your broad felt pad, and it comes up against the fellow, which is this outside part of the wheel. Well, then what you do is you tighten the nut, which is right here, and that extends it, makes the whole thing tight. And this part here would, you know what, I guess I goofed that up. This felt tip, I'm sorry, would be right down here, okay? And this part would tighten up against the fellow here. All right, I'm sorry. Then start your engine and drive or back up slowly a foot or two. When the Jiffy Jack comes to the ground, it will lift the wheel. And if you look at the picture very carefully, and you'll see a closer one on your screen here, but it actually is jacking up because this part here would be around your tire like this and actually sticking here. So when you do it, it's going to lift the whole thing up. Now, okay, that's good there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it has some interesting things about it. They said 10 million cars need Jiffy Jack. And then they say there are not many thousand in use yet. Jiffy Jack is new. That's the only reason you haven't heard much about it. This is 1925, and that's an important year because in 1925, this style wheel was on the way out. This is a demountable wheel, so what you could do is you put the Jiffy Jack on, and it would be on the inside of this, not on the outside like I was showing you. But when you have this thing up in the air like in the picture there, you'd undo these lugs here all around, and the tire in this silver part of the rim would come off, okay? And you could do that. Soon after that, like late 20s, early 30s, you started having the regular steel wheels that we think of now with the rims, and you have the tire kind of fits right on it, and you inflate it that way, and you couldn't use them. So it was kind of a neat idea. But what I'm telling you viewers out there, if you come across the Jiffy Jack, you know where we are. Okay, Kendra would be glad to hear a phone call from me about that.
Yeah.
Okay?
I'm wondering, it says it was in the Berks County Trust Building.
Yeah, I looked that up, and
I wonder where that is.
I forget now. It's like an office building that was like a bank, you know.
Yeah,
so,
it sounds like a financial
and,
place.
you know, it's probably just some little office up,
Wow.
you know, on the 3rd floor or something, like you see in old movies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, demountable rims. I was looking that up. I wanted to find out when they sort of went out of vogue. And again, it was like late 20s, early 30s. But I found out about when they were first used. Okay? And it was in France. And I'm reading this out of the Los Angeles Sunday Herald on July 11th, 1909. It says, in the Santa Monica contest, nearly all the competing cars were equipped with demountable rims of different types. It is interesting in this connection to recall the early history of demountables. They were first used in the 1906 Grand Prix road contest of the Automobile Club of France. Like the first pneumatic automobile tire, the new rims were a Michelin production. Great secrecy had been maintained regarding them prior to the race. And when, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, S-Z-I-S-Z, came to the starting line with the new rims on his Renault car, which was also equipped with Michelin anti-skid on all 4 wheels, there was a storm of protest from the manufacturers and drivers of the other cars, as it was instantly self-evident that this driver had a tremendous advantage over all other competitors. The club officials overruled all objections, however, pointing that the demountable rim showed a distinct advance in design and construction, which they were the very objects of the race was organized to promote. He won handily from that day on. Demountable rims had been considered a necessary provision if high average speeds are to be maintained. So in other words, if he had a flat or just wanted a new tire, this is a lot quicker. These demountables where they could jack the car up, undo these bolts. Again, it seems kind of slow, but it was quicker than what they had earlier. I guess they'd had to actually fix the tire. So that was, that's pretty much it with them. So again, if you see these in your garage or your attic, or you have one on display in your living room, you know, tell us. We'd love to see that.
It would look beautiful right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the same car. If you come visit, on the other side is the air pump that runs off the transmission.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you're a faithful viewer, you would have seen that on an
Yes.
earlier show.
Yep.
And if you didn't, you are an unfaithful viewer.
You'll have to go on the YouTube channel and
Yes.
look and watch it.
Good segue. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, I have another item here, and I'm going to put these notes down here.
It's nice that you picked a car with a nice wide running board.
Yes,
It's a good desk for you there.
Okay, now this next thing has nothing to do with this car at all, okay? Except maybe this part here is fender, okay? And it's a product called FlexiDrive. And if you'll show the next advertisement, and this is kind of a small advertisement. And,
It's on your desk.
Oh, yes, there you go. You know, just with the Jiffy Jack, the only information I ever saw was in that magazine that she had earlier. This is the FlexiDrive advertisement. This is the only thing I've asked around for people who are really involved with this stuff. I've looked online, nothing. Everybody refers to that page right there, which is page 100 of this book. Okay, now I'll tell you what this is, and I know you can't see the picture too well, but Gus, I know you'll be putting pictures up on the screen there on TV here. It was called the Palmley FlexiDrive. Western Manufacturing Company out of Detroit made them in like 1929, 1930. This advertisement's for a Model AA Ford truck. At construction sites, they said it was going to cut travel times from 3 1/4 to 2.5 minutes per trip. I don't know how they figured that out, but they said that. Reduce the number of trucks from 6 to 4. What it was a kit with all the necessary parts and instruction. And what you had to do, you'd have a truck, and you would remove the cab on it, and then you would mount a driver's seat. Now, you can't see it in this picture, but you mount a driver's seat on the front left fender, and they had the steering. You actually sit on the front left fender, and you're facing the back of the vehicle.
I see it down
so
there.
it was kind of interesting. And again, the pictures aren't the greatest, you know, but you'll see a dump truck there. If you look closely, you'll see a driver sitting on the front left. And actually, their advertisement says you're sitting on the right rear fender. So, because everything's backwards
Yes.
there. Okay? And they were used like that. And I just thought that was kind of interesting. So, I also found online, I looked, and this whole book, and you can close the book so you can see, it's a truck owner thing, and this would be a salesman's book for Ford Model A and AA trucks back in 1930. And it would be for the salesman, and it was kind of confidential thing, but they could compare this truck versus that truck and so on and so forth. And it's full of advertising. It's a great book if you've come across it. But it was from a company that printed this called Truck Facts, and you could buy this, which is like really expensive if you wanted to find it, but it's not around, so that's it. So again, if you know of somebody who has a FlexiDrive dump truck with the steering wheel in the right front, or any information, that'd be great. Boy, we'd love to find out.
Yeah.
So that's two things for our viewer. The FlexiDrive and the Jiffy Jack.
It's about time we gave out homework, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, there's the third thing, too.
Oh, ooh.
Okay? And I've mentioned this
You're
before.
strict this week.
No, this is I've mentioned this a few months ago, and I keep forgetting to remind them. We still need a wooden stick with the rubber pointer on it. So we can point, so we don't have to bend all the way down here like that. Right? Remember me talking about that? Yeah.
Yep.
It has to have the little eyelet in the other end.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I can hang it on a nail.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Now, before everybody goes out and goes online and gets one, the ones I've seen online are not made in this country, and they're like U-shaped. They're so warped.
Oh, no.
They're bad. So we need one,
Yeah.
you know, from
Good
Greenbrook
sturdy one.
Elementary School
Yeah.
that I went to. So,
Warwick Elementary School.
is that where you
We're
went?
there, yep.
Really? Okay, cool. I graduated. It took me 8 years. No. Okay. Okay, so that's it, and I think we're going to be moving back in the diner now.
We are. We are.
Okay, with our special guest.
Yes, I think we're getting a little history lesson.
We
Although
are getting a history lesson.
complete with photos, so don't worry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so let's go see what that's all about.
Okay, good.
Okay, well, we're back in the diner, and we are joined tonight by someone who's here every show, but you might not have seen him. Matt Loiza is a volunteer here, but he's also always in our studio audience of, or peanut gallery, whatever you want to call it here.
Peanut butter? Peanut gallery?
Here at MotorMouth. And, you know, earlier in the show, we were talking about how we do like to hear feedback, and Matt suggested this topic, and he was doing research, and Dan roped him into being the guest.
Thanks,
So,
Dan.
actually, there's a warning to you all suggesting things we might rope you into presenting on them.
Yeah, we got another one coming up in the winter that we roped into.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we got her good, too. So, as you can see, we're going to talk about, I guess, racing, but I'm going to let Matt take it from here and talk a little bit about a really cool subject. So,
All right. Well, thanks. Today, we're going to end up in Skipback and Collegeville, right down the road. But
Yeah.
first, we'll start in North Carolina. And as probably some of you out there know, this is the king, Richard Petty, in his heyday of the 1960s.
The Randleman Rocket.
I never heard that one.
Really?
Yeah, that's a new one to me.
Okay.
Well, he liked racing. He raced all over, and actually raced over. And were they in Trenton?
Yes.
So even back in the '60s, you know, NASCAR was local around this area. And one time, Richard Petty, king of racing, said, "There's no doubt about precisely when folks began racing each other in automobiles. It was the day they built the second automobile."
true.
I've heard that quote before. I've always liked that, and it's true, yeah.
Yeah.
The competitive nature of people.
Yep. And that was just one of the famous sayings of the 60s, but another one that probably more people have heard is win on Sunday, sell on Monday. That was actually started, made famous by a gentleman, let's see, Bob Tasca Sr., and he came from Rhode Island. He was a Ford dealer. He was such a special Ford dealer that Mr. Ford actually wanted him to join the company and stop selling Fords and come work for the big company and work his magic there. But Mr. Tasca really enjoyed his work, and he sponsored lots of drag racing cars over many, many years.
I believe Tasca was, not believe, but I know Tasca was the one behind the Ford Thunderbolt, too, in the mid-'60s. So, the
Well,
next picture?
It's not quite the Thunderbolt, but here's a Torino GT, and this just helps us see that even Ford in the 60s was using the win on Sunday, sell on Monday theme in their advertising. This actually states Ford wins Virginia 500, but it also lists a number of other ones. Oh gosh, I can't even read. Riverside 500, ARCA 300, Daytona 500, Carolina 500, Richmond 250, Virginia 500. And this is all from February to April, 1 year. So Ford was very proud of their success on the NASCAR circuit.
That's great artwork.
What year was that from? Do you know? That advertisement?
Not exactly.
No? That's, okay.
I can't
Nope.
remember.
Nope, that's fine.
From the 60, their headrests? Yeah, probably 68 or 69,
Okay.
somewhere right around there. So, mid-60s, racing. Very important to the car industry. Well, if you actually think about it, racing was very important to the car industry from the very beginning. Actually, the very first race that was completed and recognized as being completed occurred in 1895. And it started at a place called Jackson Park in Chicago. And this is a picture of the Jackson Park Fairgrounds. This was the site of the World's Fair in Chicago in 1893. And a couple of years, it was still there in 1895.
So cool.
And if you can look way back in the top of the picture, you can actually see Lake Michigan. Well, on Thursday, 28th, 1895, between 9 and 10 o'clock, there were 7 cars that started a race. And according to the Chicago Tribune, there were 7 horseless vehicles. And they started in the snow and the slush, and all but 2 did not make it. The other 5 were lost, quote, wanderingly, aimlessly, about the streets of Chicago or lying wrecked in some gutter along the way.
Isn't it great writing back then? Yeah.
And
You can just picture it in your mind, can't you?
I think our newsletter, the museum's newsletter, should be written that way.
All right.
There's a challenge for
All
you.
right. All right. I'll work on that.
Yeah.
starting way down in the bottom right, they traveled up along the bank, or not exactly the bank, but they traveled up north, up to Evanston, Illinois, and then they, not using the same roads, traced their way back down through Chicago to return to the starting point. That was about 52 miles, 52.4 miles to be exact. And the winning car, driven by Charles Durier's brother, Frank,
I know. Good old
completed
Frank.
it. Yeah, it took him 10 hours and 23 minutes.
Yeah.
And out of that time, 7 hours and 53 minutes was actually driving time.
So what's like
The rest was getting it average?
speed there?
5.05 miles an hour. So the very first automobile race in the United States, the winning car covered that in 5 miles an hour. Winning speed.
Popular there, huh?
Yeah, I'll
But
tell
you know, back then when, you know, that
it
was,
was faster than a horse.
It was, and you know, that would have been a neat thing. You
A
know,
walking horse, that is.
yeah, walking horse, neat thing. So.
The interesting thing about this race is it was, besides being the first race, it was run on local roads. You think of car racing now, you look back to Richard Petty, those are on circuits.
Tracks.
A mile, 2 miles long. Car racing actually started out on local roads. And this one was 52.4 miles. They were called endurance runs, basically. After Chicago to Evanston, you'd see news reports, New York to Chicago, Pittsburgh to New York, Washington to somewhere. They became a fairly popular way for manufacturers to prove to the buying public that, hey, our stuff actually works.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
you can run it and it's not going to fall apart on you.
Yeah. It wasn't about the speed so much as the fact that it could actually
You
complete,
could actually go.
complete the circuit or whatever.
Yep. And remember, this was in 1895. Well, just a few years later, in 1902, a Winton was driven across country. That was a trip that was a little over 2,000 miles, I think. But then in 1903, a Packard investor, Henry Joy, hired test driver E.T. Tom Fetch to drive a 4.5 horsepower Model F Packard across the country. This happened in 63 days. The car itself weighed about 2,200 pounds. And then laden with materials, supplies, was about 3,000 pounds.
Yeah.
All with a 4.5 horsepower motor.
That's a long trip.
It is.
4,000 miles, 51 days of actual travel time.
Okay.
So they figured about 80 miles a day.
Yeah.
And that's in 8 years, from 5 miles an hour, over 52 miles, to 80 miles a day, over 4,000 miles.
And that 80 miles is probably from sun up to sundown.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yep.
a day investment right there.
A lot of work. Now, somebody did ask me an interesting question, and I got a job for you to do.
Oh no. Get my pen out here.
Okay. Now, this was actually run on existing roads. Some of the trails had big boulders in the way, literally, and they had real trouble out in Utah. Utah was the worst, from what I understand. But if they had 800 pounds of equipment on them, how did that last the whole time? Or did they get their supplies another way, load up, go to someplace else and get more supplies?
Well, you say it's 2,200 pounds stripped. And I'm thinking, is that without people?
I would think so.
So that's a good
So-
chunk of that
Yeah.
800 pounds right there.
So you're probably down to 600, 500 pounds.
But and
About.
I'm assuming they hunted as they're traveling across too.
I would think they went to railroad depots.
That too.
But that's just an assumption.
Yeah.
So anyway, we go from 52 miles an hour in 7, 8, 9, 10 hours to 4,000 miles in 51 running days. Okay, so in the matter of 8 years, we've proved, yes, cars can work. They can actually move from place to place, and they are fairly reliable. Okay, well, what's the next thing we need besides reliability? What do people really like?
Speed.
Speed, absolutely. And
Cup holders.
man, that's in the 2000s. That's 100 years later.
Cigarette lighters.
But they were illegal in cars anymore.
Oh, now.
Where are you going to race a car for speed? If these roads are all muddy and filled with rocks and ruts. And
Probably something that's smooth with no obstructions and maybe no other traffic.
got any idea where that might be?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And it's actually a really famous place to this day.
Yeah.
And once again, Richard Petty's made a living winning there.
Yeah.
Daytona Beach.
Yep.
Daytona Ormond Beach. Literally, they raced on the beach. And somewhere in here, get it to go the right way. Oh, sorry. That's Frank in the winning car in Evanston.
Looks angry.
I'm forgetting my pictures
They
here.
all looked angry
That's
back then,
Packard.
I think.
There's the Packard.
That's
And-
a sight different from the Packard we were just standing by.
Yes. I've
half the
I've
size.
seen a recreation of that, and it's pretty authentic, including this tarp over the front of it. Yeah.
And you see there's just material right on the back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not a whole lot of room. I would bet most of it was probably gas. So they
Yeah.
didn't get very good gas mileage. Well, now we're going to move to Daytona. And this is actually the 1904 Mercedes.
I've seen that picture somewhere.
That's a pretty famous picture, actually.
You sent it to me
Yeah,
today.
well, that too. The man driving the car is Willie Vanderbilt of the
Okay.
railroad
Uh-huh.
and shipping fame. And he raced Mercedes and other cars on the beach. He also raced over in Europe. And being somebody of some wealth and means, he figured, maybe we can do something here in the United States. And he created what was called the Vanderbilt Cup. And this is a map of where the Cup ran in 1904. And this is in Long Island. It's kind of hard to see a little bit, but these are all local roads. And the lap from start to finish was about 28 miles. They ran 10 laps, and it took 6 hours 56 minutes and 45 seconds to cover that distance for an average speed of 52.2 miles per hour.
Okay. So it's
Pretty
a lot
darn-
better than 5.05.
In a matter of 9 years,
Yeah.
you know. But as you can see from the picture before, these cars were quite a bit different. They
Sure.
were built for racing.
And maybe the weather was a little better too, because there was
It
snow
wasn't
in it.
winter
It was
time.
awful snow.
Yep. And actually, here's a picture, a famous spot in the race called Krug's Corner, named after this general store, Krug's General Store. And there we are, right in town. People standing on the roof
The
of
balcony
the
roof.
store.
Yeah. Or the porch roof.
Yep. So, and 18 was one of the famous cars. It was one of the leading cars. I'm not sure if it was a Panhard or not. But Vanderbilt Cup was so special that a lot of people from Europe came over to race. It wasn't just American cars. It was where the best of Europe came to race against the American vehicles. And actually, the first number of years, it was dominated by the European automobile manufacturers. Now, if we see here, this is actually a picture from 1910. We've transitioned from road racing to circuit racing, because the road racing caused a lot of problems.
Sure.
Beat up the roads, people died, spectators
Normal
died.
traffic has to be
Interfered
rerouted
with,
or
interfered with traffic. So what's in a venue that is already existing, that's not always used?
horse
and has-
or bicycles.
Horse track.
Of course,
Tracks.
they
You know,
actually used bike tracks too, but
It was interesting that it'd be a horse track, because I'm thinking you were saying racing on the roads, we were mentioning all the problems, and you figure horses were, really skitterish with cars.
Yeah.
They were on the roads too, so, okay.
well, they did shut down the
And
roads for the
dirtying up
races.
the roads
Well,
also.
that too.
This is actually a racetrack that existed in Philadelphia, down near the Schuylkill River. This is called Point Breeze.
Okay.
And this picture is from 1910. And you can see all the rows and rows of automobiles here. Stands are filled with people. If anybody wants to have fun, you can go through and identify each of those cars. So horse tracks were used quite extensively in the late aughts and moving forward, and before people decided that we need to be on exclusively car venues, or cars and or motorcycles, such as the Indy 500. Does anybody know what this is?
It's not Point Breeze
No.
anymore.
This, we've looked at endurance, we've looked at speed, both on a beach and also flat tracks, horse tracks. Then there's one other thing. If you look at the advertising, a lot of manufacturers make the point that we can climb hills. Because you're still talking 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 horsepower, 20 horsepower. For a normal car was quite a lot. This is Mount Washington. And there's a little line traced up the mountain. That is actually the road that was built in 1861. First motorized vehicle to go up that was actually a steam-powered car. And that is Mr. Stanley himself.
Okay.
That must have
And
taken a good time.
Freeland
And a lot of nerve.
and
too.
that-
Yeah,
and
I
that's his
agree.
wife Flora. This was from 1899. And for the next 3 years, steam-powered vehicles were the only motorized vehicles that made it up the road. 1902, the first automobile that was powered by gasoline engine finally ascended Mount Washington. And that was, let's see, how far is that? It's about 7.4 miles. in length.
Yeah, we've talked to people that have gone up Mount Washington in a much more modern car than that. Although, what was that? That is 40s or 50s olds or something. And even in
Yeah,
something
late
like that,
40s,
it's
yeah.
I know as a boy, my grandfather would tell me a story. It must have been like the late teens or so. He rode an Indian motorcycle up Mount Washington.
About that.
that's cool.
And I'm thinking it was probably about 1918, 1919 before he got married
That's
and
cool.
got distracted.
Settled down.
Yeah,
Oh.
had to behave.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So the first hill climb in Mount Washington officially, where it was actually an organized race, started was in 1904, and Mr. Stanley in that race came in second. He was beaten by one automobile that was powered by gasoline. That was a 40 horsepower Mercedes that weighed about 2,200 pounds. Mr. Stanley's vehicle, 6 horsepower, 800 pounds.
Yeah, they're pretty small cars.
Yeah.
Small
And
vehicles.
he went all the way up in about 24, 25 minutes for about 18 miles per hour.
That's not bad, actually.
That's pretty good because
Yeah.
if I've driven that road and it's very twisty, turny.
Yes, it
and
is.
You don't want to miss.
Scary.
It's not. Yeah, you don't want to miss your turn.
And back then, I mean, even now, there's nothing holding you back. You know,
Yeah.
if you literally put a wheel wrong,
You're done.
You're going down for a little tumble. So this was really the beginning of a hill climb craze. And 1908 saw hill climbs throughout the country. There were hill climbs in Washington. There was hill climbs in New York City even. There was a hill climb out by the Wind Gap in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Cleveland, Chicago, Atlanta, Georgia. Easton, Connecticut is one, Sport Hill. That was a very famous hill climb for quite a while. And we also had a number of them in Pennsylvania. Starting on May 30th in what's called Great Despair.
In Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
A
yeah.
town.
Giant's Despair, excuse me. It's on the mountain that is the first exit for Wilkes-Barre when you're
Yeah.
going north on the turnpike.
Bear Mountain.
Bear Mountain. It starts near the Santander Arena, just up behind there, and it climbs up the mountain.
And it ends up, it's like within a half mile of the turnpike exit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've driven it.
It's run,
It's about that
actually, much like we have in Reading, where they've
No thanks.
run the hill climbs now, they still run Giant's Despair. That's an annual event anymore, and it's really quite an event. There's a picture that's actually of Giant's Despair. Now, the interesting thing about this is it's Willie Haupt, who was a local driver. And he was a local driver for Mr. Lee Chadwick and Chadwick Engineering of Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And this car right here is the world famous and quite unique Great Chadwick 6. What makes this car so special is if you look right behind the driver's side front wheel, there's a bump on the side of the hood. And underneath that bump, there's a supercharger. And this was the very first car that had a supercharger. And
Yep.
it really worked.
Yeah.
Over the next month, from May through June 1908, Willie Haupt and his supercharged Chadwick came in either first or second in every race he entered.
Amazing.
And starting with Giant's Despair, then they took that car up to Worcester, Massachusetts. Is that how you say it? I'm not sure. Worcester.
Worcester.
Worcester. Okay. Well,
Okay.
and that was
Massachusetts
Dead Horse
people are
Hill.
crazy.
That was the race where he only came in second. Only second. And
Come on, Willie, get it together.
well, he went 61 miles an hour though, getting up there. He was beat by, guess what kind of car?
What year?
1908. Stanley Steamer.
Okay.
After Massachusetts, they then went out to Ohio, to Cleveland. And that was a little less than a mile. And covered that in about 58 miles an hour. And finally, from Cleveland, they made their way to Norristown. And it took me a little while to figure out where the race was actually run. But through some research and some driving around, we were actually able to determine the exact route of the race.
So it still exists, that route does still exist?
Absolutely.
Like it's public road now,
You can drive it on the way home tonight if you want to.
if I want to?
Yep.
Okay. And so you found it,
I found it.
and what was your time up the hill?
Well, the problem is that if you go as fast as they
61
did,
and a half miles an hour.
there's a township building at the top where the end of the race was, and just down the hill from the end of where the race was is the county jail. So
How fitting.
I don't think you want to be speeding up
Police
that.
find somewhere to hide right there.
But this race only ran once. The other ones I just mentioned, Giants Despair, Dead Horse Hill, and Sport Hill, they all ran for multiple years. That's why it was so hard to find information about the skipback race. It was organized by the Norristown Automobile Club, and in our research, we actually found a picture that Kendra was interested in. They organized a run from Philadelphia to Gettysburg.
Over that bridge.
Yep, there was a bridge crossing this Susquehanna River, and it was actually a covered bridge.
At Columbia. That's a large expanse there
Yeah, it is. It is.
for a covered bridge.
That they did, I think that was also 1908. So the enthusiasts, the automobile clubs of the time, they were trying to develop good roads. They were pushing for legislation that was supportive of roads and also of just the use of automobiles. They fought a lot of legislative battles. They were very important into making sure that automobiles were given the opportunity to become useful to most everybody, because there was a lot of resistance. People did not want automobiles on the road. And the local automobile clubs got together, and considering that automobiles weren't exactly cheap, a lot of the people that owned them were fairly well off, and they had connections, and they were politically aware and knew what to do to further their causes.
Yeah, who to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Norristown was just one of the many automobile clubs in Pennsylvania. Probably the most famous one was the Quaker Automobile Club from Philadelphia. So, what makes this race so special? Well, for me, it's local.
The
And
skipback race.
it's skipback race. And here is a map. There's a little pin that shows where the race starts. This green area is the skipback. It's Evansburg State Park in Skipback and Collegeville area. The race was actually run on what's now known as Ridge Pike.
Oh.
It goes Philadelphia to just Pottstown. And the race, the Skipback Hill Climb, started where Ridge Pike crosses the Skipback Creek, and it heads east up into Eagleville. And it was just about 1 mile, it was 1.2 miles long, and there was a rise of a little over 600 feet or so. And just by those numbers alone, I was able to actually determine where the race was run. It was when we took our car and we first started driving, we started headed towards Collegeville. We went about 4/10 of a mile and started going downhill. I'm like, that's not right.
Not right. Not much of a hill climb.
Here's a shot from the starting point looking up towards Eagleville. And if you see at the very end as the road that you can see, there's a turn there. Well, what's interesting about that turn is there was a trolley track that ran alongside the road here. And actually right near that turn it crossed the road. And the trolleys ran during the race.
Oh.
Oh, jeez.
And they actually had gentlemen with red flags. When a trolley would come, they would throw up the red flags and they would stop the race and let the trolley go. But the trolley was important because they actually put more trolleys on the track that day to get people to come see the hill climb.
So see the, yeah.
So it was a
Not
good.
the best planning right
Yeah.
there, but
Well, it's all they had.
that's right.
You know. It's actually a fun little road. It would be nice to fly up it.
Yeah, don't do that now.
The race was run by 65 vehicles. There was a number of them. There was Auburns, Buicks, Fords, Arios, Appersons, Cadillacs, Knox, Jacksons were there. And of course, Pennsylvania was represented by the Great Chadwick 6, run by Willie Haupt. There was a car called the Pennsylvania that ran. And Reading was well represented by the Acme. And there was also one car that was from Philadelphia that I just started to learn about called the Jones Corbin.
Yes.
And that looks like another avenue of research one day.
I'd like to have a Jones Corbin here at the museum.
So if any viewers have one of them in your attic,
Yeah, if you have a
Next to
Jones
the
Corbin
next to the wooden pointed stick
and the Jiffy Jack,
and the Flexidrive.
yeah, send them over. We know of one Jones Corbin.
Really?
Yeah, we do. You do.
Okay.
I'll have to remind you after the show.
Where's the Jones Corbin?
You have one?
Mr. Jones actually drove it
Ah, that's very nice.
in the free-for-all.
For all.
Yeah, free-for-all was when they had a running start. And,
Okay.
and it was
Okay.
any car. Usually they would have a standing start and the cars would be classified by either horsepower or generally it was dollars. It would be like 2,000 and less, 2,000 to 3,000, 3,000 to 4,000. The more expensive, usually the more powerful the car.
Makes sense.
So that's from the start of the race, and then this is about halfway up. This is just that corner that we saw before. Well, the cars that ran and won, here we see a picture, an actual photograph of Mr. Haupt. And here's the supercharger right under there. He won the race, and let's see, how long did it take him? 57 seconds to go 1.2 miles. So he went up the hill about 75 miles an hour.
Wow. Wow.
Win on Sunday, or in this case Saturday, and sell on Monday.
Yeah.
Just literally the next month in July, the manufacturers were advertising their wins. And this was in one of the important trade journals, Cycle and Automobile Journal from Philadelphia. A national published right in Philadelphia. And here it says, Jackson wins, Skipback Hill. And Knox Automobile.
2 exclamation points. It's
Yep.
important.
The interesting thing about the Knox is it was a 20 horsepower vehicle. And in the free-for-all, it came in second.
I love how that's, we desire to make it generally known that I gotta write the newsletter like that, right?
That'll be fun to
Good.
read.
It's good. I just love how they add text back then. It's great.
Here they list all sorts of Knox victories, not just Skipback, but it is buried in here somewhere. And then, of course, great Chadwick 6 wins Skipback Hill Climb.
Fastest stock car in the world.
There you go.
Ooh.
Yep. And there's just another picture of one of the racing cars at the Vanderbilt Cup. So if you see, these cars weren't really stock, were they? Even though they were advertised as stock. They really weren't. But the Skipback Hill Climb lived for about a week. It took them 3 or 4 days to practice. They ran it, and it became part of the dustbin of history.
That was it. Just one race.
Just one race.
One and done.
But because of that, Chadwick got its name out there, as did other vehicles. They advertised their successes at that racetrack, as well as the other hill climbs in Pennsylvania and across the country.
So now all our viewers are going to be driving out to Ridge Pike and seeing where exactly this little hill
Yep.
climb was.
Right at the start of Skipback Creek, climb up the hill towards Eagleville.
Yeah.
When you get to the crest, that's it. 1.2 miles up. There it is. And be careful, because there's always a lot of cops there.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing that on that road today. We don't recommend that. You did not hear us tell you to do that. Drive it leisurely.
Yes, yes.
There's some other back roads you can drive up there real quick if you want. So, that's the Skipback Hill Climb.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, it's funny when you had that one ad of all the things they list where they want. Acme, we have an Acme sales book where there's a page like that. It's a little racing picture, and then it lists all the times and stuff that it won. That was
Acme
common
went
sight.
all over the country.
Yeah, they really did.
Yep.
They raced out in California as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot in the Midwest. They were
big into that.
yeah, they
very
were
much
very
so.
much so into the racing.
So you can come here and see an Acme. And pictures of a supercharged Chadwick. We don't actually have one. If you have a supercharged Chadwick in your attic, let us know. Dan will even bring it himself.
Yeah.
He'll get it here. So, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are we, are you saying where you've been? Shall we,
I don't know. We have, I think, 3 minutes,
Yeah.
so we can save that for next
all
time.
right, sounds good to me. We've been nowhere this past month. So
I was
Oh.
Skipback.
that was our where you've been. It was Ridge Pike and Skipback.
I'm going to say something real quick here, okay? I know we got only a couple minutes left, but you go up to Watkins Glen, and
Yeah.
they have the course where they race
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
It used to be a road course.
In the town, yeah.
Yeah, and it's very easy to follow, too. And I was
There's
following
maps
it.
for it, yeah.
Well, it's real easy. But anyway, I'm following it, and I'm going a little quick, and I see this little roadside marker, like on a rock, and I stopped, and it was somebody who was killed there during the Grand Prix,
Yeah.
like 1950 or something. Well, I took it easy after that. So, so you're talking about speeding up the
Yep.
hill and skip back.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the reasons Skipback did not happen again was the outcry of the damage they did to the road. And the Auto Club
Norristown Auto Club doesn't like that.
they wanted to, the Auto Club said to the township or whomever was in charge of the road, we'll pay you for the damage. They had the money to fix it, but
Yeah.
it's like, no, one and done. That caused too many problems.
Yeah. In their defense. But, oh man, we gotta wrap up. Okay.
Who's hungry?
Yeah, we're hungry and we gotta wrap up. And we hope to see all of you here on June 30th for our food truck fair. And come on in and see our Packard and see how a Jiffy Jack would work on it. And how you could sit on the fender of one of our trucks and try to drive it.
Well, except don't do that.
Don't do that. Just envision it in your mind, yes. And thank you, Matt, for our skip back hill climb history lesson. And a little bit of Chadwick history sprinkled in there as well. And we thank all of you for joining us this month, and we will see you next time on MotorMouth.